with you today our DIDLs. Remember that stands for diction, imagery, details, language, and syntax. We're going to use that in order to analyze some articles to write an argumentative essay. If you'll remember, we discussed that earlier this year whenever we read The Outsiders. We went through and we picked out some of our DIDLs to see our author's diction, so his word choice, what words did S.E. Hinton, what words did she use to convey a certain tone, and that resulted in a mood for us. What words did she use for that? Her imagery, okay, so what words did she use? What figurative language did she use to create images within our minds? We're going to review that. Language, so what tools, were there any metaphors, were there any similes that helped us see a point that she's trying to make or help us realize something about a character, point of view, or a plot, some themes, things like that. Okay, our syntax. So if you'll remember, whenever we practiced our annotation skills, we read an excerpt from The Giver, and there was some really short sentences in there that Lois Lowry used to drive home a certain point. Okay, so what sentences like that do we have in our articles? Because we're looking for an argument. So do those short sentences really tell us how our author feels? They really get our point across? Or do we have longer sentences that have more details in them about what's going on in our article? So we're looking for things like that. And then finally, we're looking for our syntax. So what kind of sentence structures do we have? And again, how does that affect what our author is trying to tell us? Okay? So those are some of our objectives. If you'll remember, yesterday we read the Declaration of Independence, because it is the first argumentative essay our country saw, and in my opinion, it is the best. I do love the Declaration of Independence. So we looked at that, and we picked apart our concrete details. So what facts did our authors use to create their argument? Okay, and then their commentary on that. So what did they have to say that further persuaded us to decide that, yes, independence from Britain is the better option as opposed to staying in their colonies. Okay, so those were our two options. Obviously, we went with independence, okay? But what kinds of things, what argumentative strategies did they use to help persuade us? So we looked at that. We saw their thesis statement. That was at the very beginning. Okay, and then we saw it restated in our conclusion of the Declaration of Independence. So keep that in mind whenever we start reading our articles, okay? So really quickly, I know we've already reviewed DIDLs, but I want to run back through it just to make sure you have all this, solidified in your mind. So whenever we read our articles, you'll be good to go, okay? So let's see. Here we go. Okay, so again, our DIDLs, our authors are using words and literary devices to create their own distinctive styles. Okay, so we did this, if you'll remember, when we did our emoji activity to do tone and mood at the beginning of the year, we talked about 3 different words. We talked about embarrassing. So what are some embarrassing situations? Embarrassment. Self-consciousness. Okay, so what are some things that make you self-conscious? And then humiliation. Okay, and we discussed this, and as a class we decided embarrassing things, they're things that happen to us, and at the time they're not funny because it embarrassed us, it made us look bad, but when we look back, eventually we'll laugh on it, because yes, it was embarrassing at the time, but now it's funny, okay? But then there's a difference between that and self-consciousness, right? Things that make you self-conscious, things that make you worry or dislike yourself, that's not funny, okay? Those are things that you worry about, and that's not funny. But that's not quite as terrible as humiliation, right? So embarrassment, that's something that happens to you, and eventually it'll be funny, but something that's humiliating will never be funny. That's one of those things that maybe you take with you for the rest of your life, or whenever you think back on it, you just really rather wouldn't, because it was a terrible experience, okay? So these are things that, they're differences in words, and our word choice is intentional, Because if something's embarrassing, you know, okay, later down the road you'll be able to laugh about it. But the other two you won't be. Okay? So, again, and we bring that up here with diction, our author's choice of individual words and their connotations that create the mood, tone, and images. These words can have positive, negative, or neutral connotations. And again, we talked about connotation and denotation at the beginning of the year, right? A word's denotation is its dictionary definition, but a word's connotation is how you feel about it. If we had everybody's connotation in our dictionary, it would be as big as the state of Louisiana, right? Because everybody has a certain feeling about a word, and that might be totally different from yours. But we all have different feelings. In my example, I used fire. Remember that? So whenever I think of fire, I think of cozy and warm, and it's cold outside. That's my favorite time of year, and I'm snuggled up on the couch, drinking hot chocolate with my dog Taco, and we're watching our favorite movie. And so I love fire. I think of a bonfire with my friends, things that are good. I have good memories with fire. But if you've been burned, you touched a fireplace, or you had some kind of unfortunate accident with fire, you may not have a good connotation of fire. So again, our connotations affect our writing, okay? And so those are things that we're keeping in mind for diction, okay? And here we have that example of houses, right? Neutral, a house, that's neutral, or a dwelling. There's nothing good or bad about that. But a great house would be a mansion or a castle. We all want to live in a mansion or a castle, right? But nobody wants to live in a shack or a hut. So think of those connotations whenever we look at our words and our two articles, okay? All right, then we have imagery, okay? So these are our senses. These are the things that are creating images in our minds, okay? So we have our sight, sound, touch, taste, and smell, and you know what all those are, okay? And you look at me and you say, Miss Wade, how can I smell an article? You can't smell the article. But if you read it and you smell something, you imagine that you are in that scene, okay? What things are you seeing? What things are you smelling? What are you doing? Just like whenever we analyzed our visual text and we looked at Starry Night, and you imagined you were in the painting. You heard the wind. There was a church down there. So some of you said that you heard church bells, okay? Those kinds of things. So we're imagining that we're in this scene. We're not looking at the article thinking that, okay? All right, and then we have our details. So that's our second D in diddles, okay? The who, what, when, where, why, and how. These are important facts that we have to know to be able to move on. We've got to know who we're talking about, why we're talking about them, where are they doing these things that we're discussing, okay? The importance of these details helps us move forward, because if we can't comprehend our basic details, then we're going to have trouble working through the rest of our diddles, okay? They also make us infer something, okay? And inference is important because it may not be directly stated, but you can learn from that where our author is going, okay? And then we have our figurative language devices under language, okay? So personification, you know what that is. So that's giving an inanimate object personal, it acts like a person, okay? So if, I tell you about my dog Taco, and I tell you I went home and he was talking to me. Taco can't talk, he's a dog, but he was barking at me, okay? So things that I attribute to him that are person-like, okay? Metaphors, those are comparisons, and our similes are comparisons using like or as. You guys are really good at picking those out, so I expect you to do that while we read, okay? And then we have idioms and hyperbole. So our hyperboles are our exaggerations, okay? I was so hungry I could eat a horse, okay? Hope you really don't plan on eating a horse, okay? Because you would be very full. But that's just an exaggeration of describing us how hungry you are, okay? And then our alliteration. So those are our consonant sounds. And we have the same thing. So Sally saw seashells down by the shore, okay? We have the same, those S sounds, okay? Then our imagery, onomatopoeia. So the bee buzzed, the cow mooed. Those sound words, and then foreshadowing, so let us know what's coming next. Now, since we're reading an article, you may not see a lot of these, but do look for some comparisons, okay? Because we want to pick those out. They'll help us later down the road, okay? So again, if you don't see a ton of them, that's okay, but look for them anyway. Okay, then our syntax. So we talked about this earlier too. These are our sentence types. This is important because our short sentences pack a punch. They get to the point. They tell us exactly what we need to know. But our detailed sentences, they give us the details. They're longer, more drawn out. So we get details in those where our shorter sentences really get to the point, really tell us what we need to know in our article. They're both important because if we wrote everything in very short, simple, direct sentences, we wouldn't have a lot of details. We'd be missing a lot of information, okay? And that same sentence structure would be boring. We want to vary that so our readers stay interested in what we're doing. Think about that. Think about the many books you read. If our author wrote exactly the same thing over and over again in the exact same format and the exact same style, you get bored. So we want to vary those sentences so we can stay interested, okay? And again, you want to look at your sentence beginnings. Also think about how this reflects on your writing, okay? Because I don't want to read Pony Boy did this, Pony Boy did that, Pony Boy did this. You need to vary that up some, okay? So look for that in our author's writings, but think about that for your writing as well. Okay? And that's it. So let's take a look at our article. The question that you have to answer is, should kids be on reality TV? Now, automatically in my last lesson, everybody said yes, 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 okay, they should be on TV. But when we read our articles, they weren't so sure of that anymore because we don't think about how these kids are under the spotlight 24/7. So this article we'll read, it mentions that any family issues they have going on, any embarrassing moments that we all have, any fights they get in with their friends, or God forbid their family is falling apart, their parents are divorcing, or something catastrophic is going on in their lives, well, the whole world knows about that, and the whole world is watching them as they go through these moments. So, something to consider. Yes, they may make a lot of money, but, at the end of the day, how important is money when you don't have your family, okay? So, together, we're going to read these two articles. We're going to look for our diddles. Okay, again, diction, imagery, details, language, and syntax. You know this, but just reviewing to help. Okay, we're going to look for those. Then we're going to try and find our parts of our essay. So our thesis, our concrete details, our commentary, and our introduction and conclusion. Okay? This is what we are keeping an eye out for because you need to have all of these in an argumentative essay. You need to have these in any type of essay. It's going to be a little different in an argumentative essay, but you got to have all these working parts. Okay? So, we're going to read these, and you're going to say, well, I could see the benefits, but I also see the negative side. You will collect evidence from both sides, but at the end of the day, you are going to have to choose. Should kids be on reality TV or shouldn't they? Okay? You will make that decision. Together, we will write an essay, and then next week, you will write your own essay, and your question I'll go ahead and tell you so you can think on it is, should kids always get a trophy? So today, when a lot of sports teams and events and things like that, everybody gets a trophy even if they participated. Do you agree with that? Or should only the kids who win get trophies? That'll be our question. I'll have articles for you. You'll do what we're doing together, but you'll do it by yourself. And so that way you can formulate and write your own argumentative essay. You'll know the things that I'm looking for, and you'll know the things to look for in these articles. Okay?